You are a leader. You may not know that you're a leader. You may know that you follow people. But in our lives, we're all leaders. We may be followed by a spouse or a child or a co-worker or a friend. But at some point in our lives, we're called on to be leaders. In research that I've done, I've discovered that there are some key traits to being a good leader. And so, as we look at this today, we're going to look at some of those traits that are required of us. Leaders are required in everyday life. And through using these traits in their life, their leadership can be expanded. Today we're going to look at 4 traits. We're going to look at loyalty, truthfulness, compassion, and sacrifice. So let's just get started. The first trait we're going to look at is loyalty. Now, Bob Sorge wrote a book about loyalty. He defines loyalty as this: a noble, unswerving allegiance rooted in faith and love that binds hearts together. Let's break down that definition. First, he says it's a noble allegiance. Now, we naturally follow people that we have an allegiance to. This is being played out every day in our military. We have soldiers who fight and even give their lives up because of their allegiance and their loyalty to our country and to the leadership of our country. The second word that he uses to describe loyalty is the word faith. Faith. Now, we can see this play out in all kinds of different ways, but in 1993 in Waco, Texas, we saw it play out in a tragic way when the followers of David Koresh committed mass suicide because of their faith in that man. The other thing he says about loyalty is Bob Sorge says that loyalty binds together, that it binds together. The Bible is so clear when it talks about the story of Peter. Peter was physically separated from God, separated from Jesus Christ, whom he had followed. But his loyalty to him bound him to Jesus, even to his own death. The next trait we'll look at is that a leader is truthful. In the book on leadership, John MacArthur tells us that a leader has to be trustworthy. This was played out for us recently as the dean of a major university was questioned about some of the things that he had stated, that they were not true. And it surfaced that many things that he said were actually false. And we don't really know how many yet. But that dean was removed from his position in dean and placed just as a professor in the school. He didn't lose his livelihood. What he lost was his leadership. The third trait we're going to look at is the trait compassion. Leaders must be compassionate. Theodore Roosevelt said, "People don't care how much you know until they know how much you care." Dr. Ronnie Floyd even tells us that to lead people means that we must build a relationship with them. And that relationship is built by expressing love and compassion. Finally, the trait on leadership that may be the most important is that leaders must be willing to sacrifice. In his book, The 21 Irrefutable Laws of the Leader, John Maxwell gives many examples of what he calls the law of sacrifice. One of the examples he gives is by the widow of Martin Luther King Jr. And she says this: "Day and night our phone would ring and someone would pour out a string of obscene epithets. Frequently, the calls ended with a threat to kill us if we didn't get out of town. But in spite of all the danger, the chaos of our private lives, I felt inspired, almost elated." See, Mrs. King understood that great leadership requires great sacrifice. Leadership speaker Gerald Brooks says, "When you become a leader, you lose the right to think about yourself." Jesus Christ even said it in Matthew chapter 20, verse 16, when he said, "The first will be last, and the last will be first." See, no matter how big the boat is, the rudder's still in the back. Being a leader may require more than some of us think. It may surprise us as to how much it requires of us. Historically, better leaders have these traits. They develop loyalty and truthfulness and compassion and sacrifice as a part of who they are. Margaret Thatcher may have said it best when she said, "Being in power is like being a lady. If you have to tell people you are, you aren't." Where these leadership traits are found, you can find an effective leader.